There's a reason people underestimate you, why they talk over you, why they test your patience, why they push your boundaries, and constantly question your worth. It's not because you're weak. No, it's because you're harmless. You give yourself away too soon. You reveal your intentions before the game has even begun. You care too openly, too visibly. You seek approval before you establish respect. But in a Machiavellian world, to be liked without being feared is the same as being invisible. This world doesn't fear goodness. It fears mystery. You've spent your whole life being trained to be a good person. Smile more. Be friendly. Be approachable. Be agreeable. But here's the truth. Goodness without strength is not admired. It's used because what people can see, they can predict. What they can predict, they can control. Machiavelli knew this. He didn't write to soothe the masses. He wrote to alert the aware. A prince who is not feared, he warned, will always be exposed, always at risk. That doesn't mean you need to be cruel. It means you need to be unreadable. Because in a room full of noise, the one who remains silent becomes the center of attention. But not because people expect a joke.
Okay.
Expect something else, something they can't name. That's the goal. Not attention, but anticipation. To be watched, not because you're entertaining, but because you're unpredictable. When you're not a threat, you're a tool. Think about it. How many times have you been dismissed until the moment you walked away? How often did they return? Only after your silence became louder than your words? How many people respected your space only after you enforced it with absence? That's because you were playing the good game, and they were playing the power game. They counted on your kindness. They counted on your empathy. They knew you'd explain first, forgive first, stay longer than you should, say sorry even when you didn't have to, never escalate, never bite. In the moment they sensed that you wouldn't escalate, they didn't. They won. Machiavelli saw it in politics. You see it in your relationships, in your workplace, even in your own home. People don't test the dangerous ones. They test the emotionally available ones. Why? Because they know your heart will stop you long before your pride does. But once you become a threat, then silently they pause. They second-guess their tone. They plan their words more carefully. They hesitate before crossing lines. Why? Because you may not bark, but you might bite. That is the power of the unexpressed. They measure their control by your reaction. The king. They make you flinch? Can they draw you into chasing, explaining, softening? Every time you do, they mark you as safe. Every time you don't, they mark you as dangerous. And dangerous doesn't mean unstable. It means unreadable. Machiavelli understood. The moment people can predict your emotions, they begin to design your future around their needs, not yours. But when they can't predict you, they stall, they observe, they comply. You spent your whole life trying to be loved first. You were trained to earn approval, to be likable, to be the one who pleases, who yields, who gives. But now, try something different. Try being feared quietly, not with threats, not with shouting, but with unpredictability, with your calm silence, with your refusal to bleed on demand. Because the man who walks into a room smiling, eager to be seen, is easily forgotten. But the one who walks in with calm detachment, with no need to prove anything, he becomes a presence. And presence lingers. Long after a voice fades. Machiavelli never picked up a sword unless he had already won through perception. Why fight a battle when you've already shaped the outcome by controlling what others think you're capable of? In the real world, power isn't about who you truly are. It's about what they believe you could do if provoked. You don't have to. Be dangerous, but you must be perceived as dangerous. How? Without saying a word. By controlling your visibility, by managing your energy like currency, by owning the silence. Because in every room, in every interaction, one law remains constant. People fear what they don't understand, and they respect what they fear. Step 1. Never reveal your full hand. The loud ones, those who constantly talk, prove boast they. Expose everything. Their dreams, their weaknesses, their triggers, their plans. And the more they show, the easier they are to predict, to manipulate, and eventually defeat. Machiavelli didn't champion transparency. He taught opacity. Understood that if they can read you, they can replace you. But if they can't read you, they have no choice but to prepare for you. So say less. React slower. Wrap your motives in fog, not to confuse others recklessly, but to control the narrative to guide how you are perceived. In a world where everyone is desperate to be noticed, the one who can't be defined becomes an obsession. They stare longer. They hesitate more. Step 2. Don't defend. Don't explain. Nothing cracks the illusion of strength faster than defensiveness. If someone criticizes you and you rush to justify, you validate the attack. If they call you distant and you explain your silence, you expose emotional vulnerability. Every explanation says one thing loud and clear: you still have access to my emotions. But Machiavelli, he would simply listen, say nothing. It'd be a nod, a neutral smile, and then a cold, calculated noted. That is how you become a threat. You absorb everything and return nothing. You don't react to record. You don't explain. You remain still. That stillness unnerves people more than rage ever could. Step 3. Send mixed signals on purpose. A real threat doesn't have to be loud. It only needs to be unpredictable. People don't fear what they understand. They fear what contradicts itself. Machiavelli might praise an ally one day and replace him the next. Smile during a meeting, then disappear in silence the following week. Offer a kind gesture, then withdraw without a trace. Why? Because nothing creates more emotional tension than inconsistency. And emotional tension often leads to quiet submission. You don't need to be cruel. It's just uncertain. Confusing enough that people tread lightly around you, not out of fear of who you are, but fear of the version of you they haven't yet met. This is what modern minds call mystery. Machiavelli, he called it a necessary illusion. Step 4. Appear. Compose when others lose control. That is the greatest form of intimidation, self-control in the presence of chaos. While the world spins in disorder, while tempers flare and voices rise, you remain unmoved. When people gossip, stay silent. When they scream, blink slowly. When they panic, lower your voice. When they insult, allow only the faintest smile to cross your face. What does this communicate? One powerful message: you can't shake me. And if you can't shake me, you can't move me. And if you can't move me, maybe you should be afraid of what I might choose to move next. That stillness, that cold refusal to engage, to escalate, to play their game, that's where the shift happens. You stop being just another participant. You become a presence they orbit around cautiously, because you have become the unknown. And in a Machiavellian world, the unknown commands more respect than the familiar. Machiavelli would never waste energy trying to defend himself mid-conflict. He'd rather speak one decisive sentence after the dust settles than deliver 100 justifications during the storm. Because the fewer words you need, the more weight each one carries. That isn't communication anymore. That's command. When people hear threat, they imagine aggression. When they hear dominance, they picture control. But Machiavelli saw it differently. He wasn't obsessed with power through violence, mastered power through presence. Because in any room, the most feared person is rarely the loudest. It's the one who says the least, but is felt the most. It is much safer to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Not because fear makes you cruel, but because fear makes people respect your silence. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to strike. You only need to make others believe that you might. And that belief alone wields more control than any argument, any plea, any outburst ever could. The unthreatening. They're not ignored. They're invited to be disrespected. Let's talk psychology. When someone doesn't fear losing you, they begin to treat you like a convenience. They take your time for granted. They interrupt you. They demand more than they ever offer. Ask, expect, even entitle themselves to your energy without reciprocity. Why? Because your presence holds no perceived weight. You're predictable, accommodating, always available. And in a Machiavellian world, those aren't virtues. They're vulnerabilities waiting to be exploited. So what does a real threat look like? It's not a weapon. It's not yelling. It's not revenge. A threat is the calm that follows disrespect. It's the silence that lands heavier than a shout. It's the mystery of a person who doesn't need to argue, doesn't explain, and yet remains unforgettable. It's disappearing from the room and making people feel the void you leave behind. That's not just presence, that's fear. Fear-controlled quiet fears your leverage, because at that point, you're not just a person anymore. A consequence. Once people experience your detachment once, they feel your absence not as a punishment, but as a mirror to their own behavior. They begin to reevaluate. When you stop replying, they reflect. When you say less, they overthink. When you don't show up, they start to notice the shift in atmosphere. Your absence becomes a mirror. Not because you scolded them, not because you punished them, but because. Suddenly, they realize something unsettling. Without his validation, I don't even know how to measure myself anymore. That is psychological warfare. It's not loud, it's not chaotic, it's not obvious. It's subtle, unnerving, and executed in silence. Machiavelli didn't need armies to create fear. He didn't need threats or violence. Didn't. What he needed and mastered was silence, distance, and uncertainty. Because when people cannot read your next move, when they can't place you neatly into a category, they either retreat in confusion or chase your favor out of insecurity. And the truth is both responses serve you. Build the wolf. Kill the dog. There's a reason videos titled, "Kill the Dog in You," or "Machiavelli Demands the Wolf" are going viral. Because everyone has tasted the humiliation of being the emotional dog, loyal even in betrayal, friendly even when mocked, obedient even when ignored. That pain, it lingers. Deep down, everyone wants to escape it. Everyone wants to become the wolf. But what they don't realize is this. The wolf doesn't bark. He doesn't whine. He doesn't explain himself. He simply watches, calculating, composed, cold. And when he finally moves, no one is prepared. That's who you must become. You don't bark. You don't beg for understanding. You don't plead. For recognition, you let your stillness speak for you. Calculate, you withhold. You create presence not by shouting, but by letting others feel the chill of your absence, the weight of your silence. Because the unforgettable are not the loudest in the room, they are the ones people replay long after they've left. Here's the irony. Loud people dominate the moment, but still, people dominate the memory. After you leave, people won't remember what you wore or what you said. They'll remember how they felt not knowing what you were thinking. They'll ask themselves, why didn't he say anything? Was he judging us? What did that silence mean? You can't move on because you never gave them closure. And when people can't close the file, they reopen it again and again. That's how threats are born. Not from what you do, but from what you might do. Because domination rarely announces itself fit, lingers in the potential. You don't have to say a word to dominate a room. Most power isn't spoken. It's signaled through posture, through presence, through the things you withhold when everyone else is desperate to be noticed. When others rush to be seen, you remain in the shadows and, suddenly, they start adjusting themselves to your silhouette. Machiavelli would never bark commands like a desperate ruler. He would sit back, observe, listen, not to respond, but to watch people reveal themselves. And then, without ever raising his voice, he'd speak one sentence that made them fear everything between his words. That space the silence is where power breathes. You want to become a threat and master your daily habits. Start small. Start subtle habits that make people question your reach. Habit 1. Never be the first to react. When someone says something offensive, triggering, or baiting, do nothing. Others will rush to respond, to defend, to one-up. But you blink. You pause. You let the storm pass without flinching. Because every person who reacts first exposes themselves as the weaker one, the one who waits, the one whose next move is unknown. That's the one who captures attention. That's the one everyone watches. Machiavelli would rather someone believe he didn't hear them than respond before they even finished speaking. His pause wasn't hesitation. It was calculation. People fear being calculated more than they fear being confronted. Habit 2. Speak slower, say less, leave earlier. Simple, yes. But this rewires how people perceive you. Speaking slowly signals control. Saying less increases the value of every word. Leaving early, that builds mystery. Because while most people speak to be understood, true power doesn't seek clarity, seeks interpretation. You want people to ask, ... double quotes. What did he mean by that? Was he agreeing, or was it a veiled warning? And why did he vanish the moment the energy changed? These are the kinds of questions Machiavelli wanted people to ask, not about what he did, but about what he meant. Not about his presence, but about his absence. He made people nervous without ever needing to raise his voice, because he never stayed long enough to be fully understood. And what people can't define, they begin to fear. Not openly, not loudly, but silently, instinctively. Habit 3. Withdraw to reinforce presence. The most dominant figures in any room aren't the ones always talking. They're the ones who appear when it matters and disappear before their presence becomes ordinary. Machiavelli understood this deeply. Power isn't always about being seen, it's about being missed. You must leave the group chat before the conversation gets dull. Exit the meeting while your influence still lingers. Leave a social space before the mood shifts. Don't stay until the energy dies. Withdraw at the peak. The dog is always there, eager, available, familiar. The wolf. He appears, and then he vanishes. When the wolf is gone, the silence he leaves behind becomes louder than any howl. That's how Machiavelli shaped power through scarcity. Be the one they notice is gone, not the one they expect to stay, because familiarity breeds comfort. But absence breeds questions, and questions create mystique. Habit 4. Never over-explain your moves. We explain because we want to be fair, honest, or understood. But Machiavelli knew something few dare admit. Every explanation is a leak of power. You said no? Then let no be enough. You changed your mind? Then own the change. You walked away? Then stay gone. Do not wrap it in emotion. Do not defend it with logic. Because once you explain, you invite argument. Once you argue, you invite doubt. And once you begin defending, you are no longer leading. And a real threat, ever pleads. It never negotiates, simply exists, unapologetic, unavailable, untouchable. Habit 5. Maintain emotional neutrality in social games. People will poke you just to see if you'll flinch. They'll say something offhand, flirt with sarcasm, or joke about your silence, just to provoke a reaction. Why? Because neutrality scares them. That unreadable energy, they feel it. And because they can't decode you, they assume you're stronger than they are. So they test you again, and again hoping you'll slip. But each time you don't, you rise in their subconscious hierarchy. Don't need to dominate them physically. Let them wrestle with your calm, smile, observe, withdraw. Because the more they try to read you, the more they reveal themselves. And the more they reveal, the less powerful they feel. Machiavelli didn't just appear powerful, he trained his power daily. He built rituals of restraint, movements of control, a posture that said, "You don't know what I'm capable of, and you never will. But if you cross me, you might find out." There is, however, a subtle danger, a line too easily crossed. The line between mystery and neglect, between silence that demands attention and silence that drifts into irrelevance. That's where Machiavelli's genius truly emerged, not in choosing fear over respect, but in balancing both so precisely that even his silence echoed, because fear without respect breeds rebellion. If people fear you and nothing more, they'll follow with clenched teeth and hidden plans. They'll say yes and think no. They'll comply in daylight and conspire in the dark. They'll submit with a bow but dream of your collapse. That's not power. That's a countdown. Machiavelli knew this. That's why he ... He didn't just command silence. He earned respect through unpredictability, through the carefully balanced blend of mystery and mastery. Fear in his world was never raw intimidation. It was art. It was precision. It was always layered with something deeper. Controlled admiration, not cheap love, not performative likability, but something rarer. Reverence. The kind of reverence that says, he could destroy me, but he hasn't. Yet here's the paradox. When people respect you without also fearing you, that respect mutates. It becomes entitlement. If people only respect you without that subtle undercurrent of tension, they will celebrate your leadership, applaud your composure, and even trust your capabilities. But slowly, inevitably, they'll want more than they give. They'll begin to talk over you, casually interrupt, and expect your kindness as a constant. And when kindness becomes a guarantee, presence becomes background noise. You're no longer watched. You're simply liked. In the moment people stop watching, they begin calculating your limits. Underestimation enters. Control slips. So what's the solution? Tension. Not chaos, not drama. That invisible current that trails behind powerful people. The kind of presence that makes others straighten their backs when you enter the room. Not because they fear your outburst, but because they can't predict your depth. They feel it. You're kind, but never soft. You're calm, but far from passive. You're silent, but unmistakably awake. Always there, but not fully reachable. This tension isn't something you perform. It's something you train. And how do you train it? Machiavelli would start here. Be consistent in control, but inconsistent in emotion. Always composed, never reactive, but don't be emotionally available on command. Some days you're warm, other days observant, unreadable, occasionally amused, never angry, never indulgent. You remain poised but slightly out of reach. That subtle unpredictability keeps others walking carefully. It's watching closely, never fully certain how far they can push. Then comes the precision, the surgical strike. You don't speak often. But when you do, every word is calculated. You end arguments with a single line. You dissolve hostility with a calm observation. You correct one's sand only once. Then you retreat. You vanish from the conversation. No lingering, no backtracking, no repetitions, just stillness. You leave the message unfinished. Somehow that echo stays louder than any speech ever could. That's how you build lasting tension. You make them feel the weight of losing you without ever threatening to leave. No ultimatums, no emotional theatrics, just quiet absence. That's what Machiavelli understood. He didn't ask for attention. He didn't demand presence. He trained others to feel the loss when he withdrew. You stop replying. You stop nodding. Your voice goes cold, not bitter, just professional. You leave the room early. No announcement, no excuse, just silence. And then they realize something they never noticed before. Your presence held weight. A weight they never measured until it was gone. And the next time, they walk lighter. Let praise float in the room without needing your validation. When someone offers a compliment, you don't flinch, you don't fumble, you don't return it. Like currency, simply nod, hold eye contact, perhaps offer the hint of a smirk hand, then let it land in the silence. You don't chase approval, because when you accept praise without needing it, you tell them something far more unsettling. You already know you're worthy, and ... Their words were a courtesy, not a necessity. This is how you walk the line. You allow people to respect your stillness, but fear the mystery that lies beneath it. That tension, it is palpable, almost electric. That's how Machiavelli would have ruled today. The loud ones get noticed, but the quiet ones get remembered. Machiavelli didn't just want to command people in the moment. He wanted to live in their minds long after he left the room. Because true power isn't about dominance or loud control. It's about a presence that lingers, a presence that remains long after your absence. The most dangerous kind of presence is the one that never bothered to explain itself. Consider this. Men are quicker to forget the death of a father than the loss of their inheritance. So now ask yourself, what kind of man must you become to feel like an inheritance when you disappear? To be the kind of presence that haunts thoughts and conversations even in your physical absence? Let's build that version of you step by step. Obsession isn't created by availability. It's created by distance. People don't obsess over what they fully understand. They obsess over what feels close, yet never quite belong to them. That delicate balance, being present enough to feel real, yet distant enough to remain unreachable, is the secret to becoming unforgettable. You offer a moment of eye contact that lingers longer than expected, a word that cuts deeper than it should, a calmness that unsettles the emotionally unstable. And then, just like a shadow at dusk, you vanish. That absence becomes a psychological loop, an unfinished thought they cannot close. Strategy 1. Don't give them what they expect. Most people reveal themselves entirely within minutes. They are overly kind, overly expressive, overly available. You, however, smile less, speak slowly, and offer nothing more than necessary. You create a contrast so sharp, it forces people to slow down around you. They recalibrate their tone, their behavior, even their breathing, not because you demanded it, but because your energy shifted the entire dynamic. Now, you've left a mark. Strategy 2. Let them project, then withhold. People will try to label you. He's intense. She's mysterious. They're hard to read. Let them, because once they start projecting, they start obsessing. They'll replay your silence, dissect your expressions, invent stories to explain the parts of you they can't access. Hey, don't correct them. Their imagination is now your personal PR team, and the more confused they are, the more they return. Strategy 3. Leave them mid-sentence, metaphorically or literally. Emotional closure is what most people live for. They want full explanations. Clean exits, a bow at the end, but you end conversations slightly before they feel finished. You disappear slightly before they are ready. You deliver silence slightly after they expected a response. Why? Because that incompleteness becomes a hook. They'll replay the moment again and again, trying to finish what you started. That's how presence turns into obsession. Strategy 4. Protect... Your inner world is like a kingdom. When people ask what drives you, you simply say, I'm focused. When they ask if you're okay, you respond, always adjusting. When they want to know what you want, you answer, that depends. On the day, you give them hints, never full headlines. Because the moment someone fully understands your why, they start plotting your how. But when your inner world feels like a fortress, they stop knocking. Instead, they begin watching, wondering, and thinking about you long after you've stopped thinking of them. Machiavelli's genius wasn't in being remembered as a great man. No, it was in being remembered as a man who could have done anything, yet chose when, how, and if. That if that choice is the hook, it's what they can't forget. You've now reached the final phase, where silence is no longer a mere tactic, but your default setting. You no longer hide what you feel. You simply decide when, where, and if it's worth showing. Machiavelli's final form wasn't loud or brutal. It was disciplined, because true power doesn't come when they obey you out of fear. It comes when they start moving differently, just in case you're watching. Remember, the unreadable man cannot be cornered. Once they think they understand you, they start managing you. But the moment they realize they will never fully get to the bottom of you, they give up on control. Instead, they give you space, because you have become unpredictable. What is unpredictable becomes untouchable.